So, you think she won't notice? Jonathan's voice echoed across the glittering hall, heavy with arrogance, as Charlotte Avery entered the charity gala, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor. The chandeliers overhead cast a warm glow, bouncing off the crystal glasses and polished silver trays carried by waiters weaving through the crowd. Guests paused mid-conversation, whispers floating like delicate smoke, as Charlotte's gaze swept the room with measured calm. Across the hall, Isabella Grant clung to Jonathan's arm, laughing a little too loudly, unaware that every step she took seemed to fade against the quiet radiance Charlotte radiated. Flashbacks danced behind Charlotte's eyes. A sunlit morning in their old home, the quiet comfort of shared coffee, the fleeting warmth of Jonathan's smile before betrayal entered their lives. Charlotte's breath remained steady, shoulders squared, and lips curved into a subtle, knowing smile that betrayed nothing, yet promised everything. The air seemed to shift as she passed a group of socialites, her presence commanding attention without a single word, leaving them guessing, captivated by a mixture of awe and curiosity. Jonathan's smirk wavered, the confidence in his stance faltering just slightly as Charlotte's eyes met his, cool, unflinching, and luminous with purpose. The soft strains of the string quartet filled the background, yet to Charlotte, the music was secondary to the rhythm of her own heartbeat, a steady drum of resolve and dignity. A waiter brushed past her with a tray of champagne, the effervescent bubbles reflecting the lights like tiny stars, but Charlotte barely noticed, her focus fixed on the far corner of the room where she knew Alexander Fox would eventually appear. She moved with an effortless grace, each step measured, almost choreographed, her presence a silent declaration of strength reclaimed. The whispers grew louder as more eyes turned toward her, the contrast between her composed elegance and Isabella's overt flamboyance making the latter seem almost theatrical. Charlotte's mind wandered briefly to the preparations, the quiet mornings spent planning, the dresses carefully chosen not for spectacle but for statement. Every detail, every gesture had been thought through, yet executed with the natural ease that made it seem as if destiny itself had arranged this moment. As she approached the grand staircase, her gaze swept the crowd once more, absorbing the anticipation and the tension like a seasoned strategist reading a battlefield. Jonathan's whispered comment to Isabella barely registered, lost in the ripple of glances and subtle nods Charlotte collected along the way. Each step, each poised movement, reinforced the invisible barrier she had erected around her dignity, a shield stronger than any confrontation or words could dismantle. And as she paused momentarily under the central chandelier, light catching the crimson of her gown, the hall seemed to hold its breath, everyone sensing that this was no ordinary guest arriving, but a force of quiet resolution ready to tip the scales of expectation in ways no one yet understood. Charlotte moved through the crowd with effortless composure, each smile she offered to passing guests measured and warm, a quiet command over the room that drew eyes without a single word. The faint scent of fresh roses and polished wood mixed with the crisp aroma of champagne, creating an almost intoxicating backdrop that framed her presence like a portrait come to life. In a quiet corner, a cluster of philanthropists murmured among themselves, glancing repeatedly toward Charlotte as if drawn to an unspoken force, noting the confidence in her posture and the subtle authority in her gaze. Her thoughts wandered briefly to the long months of rebuilding, the early mornings spent in her small office drafting proposals for new initiatives, the painstaking calls to sponsors, the meticulous attention to every detail of her charitable projects, all of which had slowly stitched together a reputation that now preceded her like a whisper of wind before a storm. She approached the display of auction items, her fingertips grazing the polished surface of an ornate vase, appreciating its craftsmanship and the echo of history in its curves, as if the room itself acknowledged her steadiness. A quiet laugh from a nearby table drew her attention, a socialite commenting on Isabella's flamboyant attempts to dominate the space, unaware that every attempt was dimmed by Charlotte's subtle glow. Alexander Fox appeared, smooth and understated, his presence beside her unobtrusive yet unmistakable, a silent partnership that communicated more in a glance than many could in paragraphs. The chatter of guests, the clinking of glasses, the soft melodies floating from the quartet, all formed a symphony around her. But Charlotte remained centered, her mind calculating the perfect rhythm to step forward at the right moment. She paused near the grand staircase, observing the delicate interplay of lights and shadows, the way her crimson gown caught the luminescence of the chandeliers, and the way the room seemed to subtly rearrange itself around her confidence. She took a breath, absorbing the ambient sounds and scents, allowing herself a fleeting moment of satisfaction for the years of resilience that had led her here. Even as whispers of her presence rippled through the hall, she did not seek acknowledgement, only preparation, a silent strategy forming with every measured step, every gentle tilt of her head. The air around her thickened with anticipation as she moved, the energy in the room shifting imperceptibly, a quiet crescendo that promised more than casual observation, hinting at the approaching intersection of past and present that would command attention without fanfare or need for dramatic proclamation. Charlotte paused at the top of the grand staircase, the crowd below unaware of the subtle power shift that had taken place in the span of minutes. Alexander Fox stood beside her, a quiet presence that added gravity to her every gesture, his calm demeanor amplifying her poised authority. Isabella attempted to draw attention again, tilting her head and smiling theatrically, but the energy of the room had shifted irreversibly. Heads turned, murmurs rose, and the spotlight seemed to favor Charlotte, capturing the collective gaze with every measured step she took down the stairs. Jonathan's confident posture faltered as he watched her glide past, her elegance commanding attention without a single word, and a trace of unease crept into his expression. Charlotte's mind was clear, her memories of long hours spent building her initiatives, late nights planning events, and the discipline it had taken to reclaim her independence fueling a quiet triumph that radiated through her every movement. The guests could not ignore the juxtaposition of Charlotte's refined poise and Isabella's overt attempts at glamour, the contrast sharpening the invisible line that Charlotte had drawn with her presence alone. She moved closer to the center of the hall, and Alexander lightly touched her elbow, guiding her subtly toward the podium, where a subtle announcement awaited. Every glance, every subtle nod from influential attendees reinforced her rising influence, the room bending perceptibly toward the dignity and assurance she carried effortlessly. Jonathan attempted to regain composure, whispering something to Isabella, but the words fell flat as Charlotte's serene focus and radiant confidence dominated the space. Charlotte lifted her chin, scanning the faces of the audience with a steady, unflinching gaze, a silent promise that this evening was hers to define on her own terms. The soft lighting highlighted the crimson of her gown, creating a visual melody that the string quartet could not compete with, and a hush fell over the room, as if acknowledging the culmination of her quiet campaign of resilience. Every step forward, every deliberate pause, sent an unspoken message to everyone in the hall that strength and poise need no explanation, that success built through patience and determination commands its own recognition. And as she reached the center, Charlotte shared a brief glance with Alexander, a subtle acknowledgement of shared vision and strategy, leaving the audience intrigued, the air thick with anticipation, and Jonathan grasping that the balance of attention, once his, had shifted irrevocably without a word spoken. Charlotte exited the gala hall later that evening, the soft glow of the chandeliers reflecting off the polished marble and casting a warm light on her determined features. Her footsteps echoed gently against the floor as she moved with deliberate purpose toward the quiet alcove where she often found herself reflecting after large events. The murmurs of the remaining guests and the faint strains of the string quartet created a backdrop that allowed her to feel fully present in the moment, each sound accentuating her sense of accomplishment. She paused, inhaling deeply the subtle scents of roses and polished wood lingering in the air, allowing herself a moment to acknowledge the progress she had made since those long months of rebuilding her life. The image of Alexander Fox appeared in her mind, the quiet confidence and understated support he had provided, a steadying presence that had helped her navigate through each delicate social interaction and philanthropic negotiation. Charlotte ran her fingers lightly over the edge of the marble railing, feeling the cool, smooth surface beneath her touch, and considered the transformation she had undergone from the tentative steps she took in her small office to the poised elegance she now embodied. The guests who lingered near the periphery watched as she moved through the space, sensing the aura of calm power she exuded, an influence that drew attention without demanding it, commanding respect through the mere certainty of her presence. She reflected briefly on the long hours spent coordinating initiatives, the meticulous planning that ensured each detail aligned with her vision, and the discipline that had become second nature in her pursuit of personal and professional fulfillment. The evening sunlight waned into subtle artificial lighting, casting soft shadows that highlighted the contours of her figure and the rich texture of her crimson gown. Charlotte allowed herself a brief, private smile, a silent acknowledgement of the quiet victories that had accumulated over time, each step reinforcing the dignity and composure that had been her constant companions. Alexander arrived quietly, taking his place beside her without a word. Their shared understanding communicated in a glance that held unspoken agreement and recognition of the effort that had brought them to this point. She could feel the weight of anticipation in the hall subtly lifting as the remaining guests noticed the ease with which she navigated the space, the effortless elegance that marked every movement, every gesture. Charlotte took another slow breath, letting the rhythm of the room and the confidence she had cultivated blend seamlessly, a moment suspended between past effort and the unfolding promise of recognition yet to come. Her eyes swept the crowd once more, observing the subtle shifts in attention, the delicate nods and murmurs, the sense of curiosity and admiration, all feeding into the quiet satisfaction she carried like an invisible crown. Charlotte found herself stepping into a sunlit room the following morning, the soft hum of the city outside providing a serene backdrop to her thoughts. The office she had recently acquired for her philanthropic initiatives was modest yet elegant, with large windows allowing natural light to spill across polished wooden floors, illuminating shelves lined with meticulously organized files and notes. She moved to her desk, placing her bag down with a quiet determination, the weight of the previous evening's success still settling comfortably on her shoulders. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted from a nearby corner where a small machine stood, reminding her of the countless mornings spent preparing for events like these, refining each proposal, each strategy, each plan to perfection. Alexander Fox had arrived shortly after her, carrying documents that outlined the next wave of charitable projects, and his presence brought a calm assurance, an unspoken understanding that they were aligned in purpose and vision. Charlotte reviewed the notes with careful attention, her mind simultaneously tracing the path of past setbacks and the careful architecture of her renewed influence. She allowed herself a quiet smile as she envisioned the upcoming gala, the potential connections, and the subtle impact that her work would create, not just for her reputation, but for the causes she cared about deeply. The sunlight shifted slightly, highlighting the crisp lines of her attire and the poised composure she carried naturally, an elegance forged through resilience and careful planning. Guests and donors would soon begin to arrive for her small pre-event gathering, but Charlotte remained focused on the strategic flow of introductions, speeches, and personal interactions that would ensure each participant felt valued and inspired. Every call she made in previous weeks, every careful decision regarding partnerships, every note penned in meticulous detail contributed to a tapestry that now began to show its full brilliance. Alexander leaned slightly toward her, offering a suggestion for engaging with a key donor, and Charlotte nodded, appreciating the subtle collaboration, the trust built on shared goals and mutual respect. She glanced at the clock, noting the precise timing needed to orchestrate the pre-event activities smoothly, ensuring that the presentation of her initiatives would have maximum impact. A gentle breeze from the open window carried the faint scent of spring blooms from the courtyard below, infusing the room with a quiet vitality that mirrored the renewal Charlotte felt within. Each breath, each deliberate movement, reinforced the sense of control she had cultivated, a deliberate contrast to the uncertainty and disregard she had once faced, a testament to the patience, skill, and unwavering focus that had guided her every step since reclaiming her life. Charlotte adjusted the hem of her crimson gown in the softly lit room, the golden afternoon sun spilling across the polished floor and catching the subtle shimmer of her carefully chosen jewelry. Each movement she made was deliberate, an extension of the discipline she had honed through months of planning and preparation. Every detail of her appearance and posture a silent statement of her regained authority. Alexander Fox stood a few steps behind her, his presence a calm anchor, silently reinforcing her composure and lending an understated weight to their shared purpose. The air carried the faint aroma of fresh flowers arranged meticulously on the marble countertops, blending with the subtle scent of leather-bound portfolios that lined the shelves, all arranged with precision to reflect the order and clarity Charlotte valued. She reviewed the final notes for the upcoming evening event, tracing her fingers over the printed sheets, internalizing each interaction, each introduction, each anticipated response with the meticulous care of someone who had rebuilt their life on both patience and strategy. The sound of her heels clicking softly against the polished floor echoed gently, a rhythm that matched her steady, confident heartbeat, a pulse that spoke of both readiness and quiet anticipation. Sunlight shifted as the afternoon waned, casting long shadows across the room and highlighting the contours of her figure and the confident lines of her posture. She paused by the window, gazing briefly at the city below, the skyline a reminder of the vast network of influence she was cultivating, each initiative a step toward not just recognition, but meaningful impact. Alexander handed her a pen, and with a graceful nod, Charlotte signed the documents that represented both the culmination of her careful planning and the launch of new opportunities, each signature a symbolic step toward asserting her presence and capability. The soft hum of the city beyond the glass, the muted chatter of staff preparing for the evening, and the gentle rustle of fabric as she moved created a symphony of anticipation, a backdrop for the quiet power she carried effortlessly. Every glance she cast, every small adjustment of posture, communicated control and self-assurance, sending subtle ripples through the environment that even without words commanded attention. Charlotte took a slow, deep breath, absorbing the moment fully, feeling the alignment of preparation, intent, and timing, and in that pause, a calm confidence settled over her like a second skin, signaling that she was ready to enter the evening not merely as a participant, but as a force whose presence and purpose would shape the perceptions and expectations of all who encountered her. The gala hall shimmered under the glow of the chandeliers as Charlotte stepped into the main room, every eye instinctively drawn toward her as if the room itself recognized the shift in energy she carried. Guests paused mid-conversation, their whispers a soft murmur that rippled through the crowd, each note highlighting the quiet authority she embodied. Alexander Fox walked silently at her side, a steady presence that amplified the poise in Charlotte's every gesture, and together they navigated through the sea of elegantly dressed attendees with an effortless grace. Jonathan Pierce stood nearby, his expression tightening as he noticed the subtle transformation in the attention surrounding Charlotte, Isabella Grant's confident laughter faltering as it failed to capture the same light. Charlotte's steps were measured, each motion deliberate, her gaze sweeping across the faces before her, acknowledging the social hierarchy while simultaneously redefining it with her composure. The gentle clinking of glasses and the soft strains of the quartet underscored the unfolding tension, yet Charlotte moved as if in her own sphere, unaffected, each breath deliberate and steady. She approached the central display where the evening's key donors were gathered, her presence immediately commanding recognition without a word, the natural authority she exuded palpable in the space. Jonathan's whispered comments to Isabella seemed to dissipate into the air, irrelevant against the silent command Charlotte radiated, her every glance and nod orchestrating the attention of the crowd with refined precision. Subtle gestures, the tilt of her head, the gentle sweep of her gown, all combined into a performance of quiet dominance, making the once dominant Isabella seem almost theatrical in her attempts to assert presence. Charlotte's mind cataloged each interaction, each appreciative glance, the moments of hesitation, the subtle signs of deference, all forming a mental map of influence she was quietly establishing. She paused briefly, letting her eyes meet those of influential attendees, a nod of recognition here, a gentle smile there, each reinforcing the network of social alignment she had cultivated. The atmosphere thickened with anticipation, a sense of expectancy that Charlotte alone seemed to control, moving with the precision of someone who had meticulously prepared for this exact convergence of circumstance and timing. Every subtle adjustment in posture, every controlled motion, sent an unspoken message of authority and capability, quietly asserting that the balance of power had shifted. And as she reached the central space, the soft lighting catching the contours of her elegant figure, the hall seemed to hold its collective breath, aware that Charlotte had arrived not merely as a guest, but as a force of calm, undeniable presence, poised to influence the course of the evening through a silent, commanding grace. Charlotte felt the room subtly shift as Alexander Fox stepped forward beside her, his calm presence amplifying the quiet authority she had cultivated throughout the evening. The soft murmur of guests hushed as Charlotte approached the podium, every eye drawn to the serene confidence she radiated, the room collectively sensing the weight of the moment without a single dramatic proclamation. Jonathan Pierce's posture tightened, a flicker of unease crossing his features as he realized that the attention he once commanded had shifted irrevocably toward Charlotte. Isabella Grant, for the first time, hesitated mid-laugh, her smile faltering as the elegance and poise Charlotte exuded seemed to illuminate the space, rendering every previous display of flamboyance secondary. Charlotte's hand rested lightly on the podium, the polished surface cool beneath her fingertips, and she allowed a calm, measured gaze to sweep across the room, acknowledging the donors and influential figures with subtle nods and a composed smile. Alexander handed her a folded document, a subtle cue that this was the culmination of months of careful planning and deliberate effort, and Charlotte's eyes flickered briefly to him, a silent confirmation passing between them that every calculated step had led to this convergence. She began to speak, her voice steady and measured, each word deliberate, conveying vision and purpose that captured the attention of every listener, quietly asserting her influence over the room without overt confrontation. The soft clinking of glasses and rustle of evening gowns faded into the background as Charlotte's presence became the central focus, her demeanor both commanding and inviting, creating an atmosphere where respect and admiration flowed naturally from every direction. Jonathan shifted uneasily, aware that Charlotte's calm authority had reshaped the social dynamics, the subtle power she held now palpable to all in attendance. Guests leaned slightly forward, drawn to the clarity and sincerity in her delivery, noticing the grace with which she managed the balance of attention and influence. Charlotte's mind moved fluidly between her speech, the engagement of key donors, and the silent communication with Alexander, orchestrating the evening with a level of precision that left no detail unattended. As she concluded her remarks, a gentle hush settled over the room, an acknowledgement of her control and the influence she wielded without arrogance or overt display. Every glance, every subtle gesture reinforced the narrative she had constructed over months of preparation, a quiet demonstration of competence and dignity that left an indelible impression. The soft lighting caught the shimmer of her gown and the calm assurance in her expression, leaving Jonathan and Isabella both acutely aware that the balance of attention, power, and respect had shifted permanently in Charlotte's favor. And as she stepped back from the podium, the room seemed to exhale collectively, the anticipation lingering, hinting at the profound reveal and the transformation of relationships that would continue to unfold in the subtle, commanding presence Charlotte maintained throughout the evening. Charlotte stepped away from the podium, the warm glow of the chandeliers illuminating her calm expression as the room absorbed the subtle shift of energy she had orchestrated throughout the evening. Every gaze that had once followed Jonathan Pierce or Isabella Grant now lingered on her, a silent acknowledgement of the influence she wielded without a word. Alexander Fox matched her stride, a quiet presence that reinforced the unspoken power dynamic they shared, the pair moving with effortless coordination through the crowd. Charlotte's mind traced the arc of the evening, noting the reactions, the tentative smiles, the discreet nods, and the quiet admiration that had gathered around her like an invisible halo. She paused near a cluster of attendees, offering a measured smile that communicated gratitude and acknowledgement, and in response, she felt the subtle weight of respect and recognition settle firmly in her favor. Jonathan lingered at a distance, his confident posture replaced with a shadow of uncertainty, the realization settling in that the silent grace and deliberate composure Charlotte embodied had shifted the balance of influence irrevocably. Isabella attempted a gesture, a subtle move to regain attention, but it was too late. The narrative of the evening had already been rewritten. Charlotte's thoughts drifted to the months of preparation, the careful cultivation of alliances, the tireless effort to build initiatives that reflected her values and vision, each step executed with patience and precision that had now reached its apex. She allowed herself a deep breath, letting the rhythm of the room, the soft hum of conversation, and the gentle music blend into a harmonious backdrop that underscored the quiet triumph of her presence. The soft rustle of fabric and the gentle clinking of glasses became part of the symphony she conducted without overt control, every movement, glance, and gesture contributing to the subtle choreography that marked her mastery of social nuance and personal dignity. Alexander lightly touched her arm in acknowledgement, a signal that the final moments of the evening were approaching, and Charlotte responded with a calm nod, a mutual understanding of the work accomplished and the quiet victories secured. Guests who had initially dismissed her now observed with renewed interest, their attention drawn by the effortless authority she carried and the poise that seemed to radiate naturally from her. As Charlotte moved toward the exit, the light catching the rich tones of her gown, a hush of admiration followed, leaving Jonathan and Isabella acutely aware that the night had concluded with Charlotte emerging not only unscathed but undeniably elevated. The room seemed to hold its breath for a final instant, a collective recognition of the dignity, strategy, and quiet resilience that had guided her throughout, leaving a lasting impression that the power of composure and purpose could achieve what words and confrontation never could, a testament to the indelible strength she had reclaimed and the silent victory she now carried as her own.